Hey folks, I'm Tim Freitas with the Garden of English. Today, backed by popular demand, I have brought in my dear friend Jamie Walton once again. He's going to be going over the top 3 tips that every teacher should know for when they write college letters of recommendation. Don't forget, he used to be an admissions counselor at Bentley University. Just an FYI, Jamie likes to be paid with likes and subscribes for this video. So, smite the thumbs up and the subscribe button right down below.
Now, before I give you your tips that I know you're excited about, I want to give a quick heads up if you work in the guidance office. Admissions folks know you are usually required to write a letter for all of your students, and you may not know them well. That's okay. We are aware and won't hold it against you. These upcoming tips are mostly for teachers, but may be helpful for you as well. Tip number 1 is often easier than done. Narrow your focus. You really shouldn't include information that the admissions folks already have. This includes things like GPA, SAT scores, or activities that the student was involved with. It's most important for you to focus on the specific areas where you have dealt with in the student's life. This will mainly be in the classroom. Admissions wants to know how you feel authentically about that student. If you think the student is awesome, then say it. If you don't, I'm not sure why you would agree to write that letter in the first place. Anyway, in your letter, describe your experiences with that particular student, and please be specific. And please, no form letters, but if you must, please at least change their name. Do it for us. Nothing says don't admit the student like a generic letter. You really should be selective when you pick who you write a recommendation for. Even if a student did well in your class, if you don't really know him or her, you should suggest they find a teacher who knows them a little bit better. Remember, since this is about giving insights about the student that admissions can't see on the transcript, you could consider writing a letter even for that non-traditional candidate, especially if you have a good story to tell. This actually leads me to tip number 2, tell stories. To be honest, admissions counselors are very busy and have sometimes thousands of these recommendations to read. Therefore, skimming is a must, and the typical, often vacuous descriptors just don't stand out. I mean, typical descriptions won't hurt the student, but it doesn't add much either. But when you tell specific stories to exemplify your claims, you'll grab any reader's attention. Everyone loves a good story. Instead of just telling us that the student works hard, tell us a brief story of when you personally witnessed that. Stories help the student become a real person instead of just an applicant. When you're picking what stories to tell, pick 2 or 3 that work to highlight traits that you feel like would be very valuable for college admissions counselors. These are things like compassion, creativity, leadership, or perseverance. Also, if you're writing for a specific school, check out their mission statement on their website. And what you can consider is writing stories based on the characteristics listed in those mission statements. Okay, our final tip is the absolute hardest piece of advice for Tim and myself to follow. Quite frankly, it's the hardest for every English teacher to follow. Be brief. Told you it would be hard. I know this is difficult because you want to tell counselors everything that you think makes your student the most amazing kid and that you care about making sure it's written well. And though admissions appreciates that you actually care about your student and your grammar, those reading your letters will more greatly appreciate your willingness not to write a novel. If you can keep it to a page long or a page and a half max, that would be ideal. As I said already, there are tons of applications to read. When we see a long recommendation letter, we will sometimes skim it. If something grabs our attention, or if the student is really on the fence, then we will read it in full. But I don't want what you have to say to get lost in the shuffle of too many paragraphs.
Is there really such a thing as too many paragraphs though? Honestly?
Yes, so get right to the point. Avoid overly esoteric phrasing. Avoid hyperbolic descriptions. Avoid telling 14 different stories. We just want specific things that stand out, and we don't want, unfortunately, to spend a lot of time searching for them.
One more note about brevity. If you really insist on writing a significant amount of information about whichever student you're writing about, consider highlighting the most important sentences that you want the admissions counselor to really focus on as they work through the piece. Then you can get the best of both worlds. A letter that you know in your heart is complete and a quick guide for whomever actually reads it. Oh, and by the way, I do have one more question for you, Jamie. When you were reading all of your letters, what types of stories would stick out the most to you?
That's a great question, Tim. I love hearing about stories when students overcame challenges that most other kids never had to face. Another one is when teachers tell about how a student has actually changed how they approach their classroom and their teaching. And lastly, if you can tell a story that's really funny but also tells us something about the student, please do it. We love to laugh. And that's the best I have for you.
Well, I greatly appreciate that. And that's it, folks. Those are the best things to remember when you begin to gear up to compose your letters of recommendation for this year. So take that advice to heart. You can also take this advice to heart. Tell your students that if they want free college essay help, they can access all that they need in this playlist right over here.